Patek Philippe is one of the most prestigious and beloved watch companies in the world, and has been for almost 200 years. But who created the first Patek Philippe watch? The story of the poor refugee with a passion for watchmaking who built this now billion-dollar company is almost unbelievable. Antony Norbert de Patek was born on June 14, 1812, in rural Poland. His parents, Anna Piasecka and Joachim Patek, were not wealthy, but they did have enough to move the family to Warsaw when Antony was only 10 years old. However, Antony did not stay in Warsaw for long, as at only 16 years old, he joined the Polish cavalry to fight in the uprising that had begun against the neighboring country of Russia. It's important to understand that Antony's time in the Polish army shaped him in many ways. He was wounded, decorated with the Virtuti Militaris Golden Cross, the highest possible honor, and eventually forced to flee to France when it was clear that the Polish would not win the uprising. Because of political unrest, Antony was only allowed to stay in France for 1 year before he was forced to move again. This time, he headed to Switzerland, where the next chapter of his life would begin. Although Antony learned invaluable lessons in the uprising in Poland, he was only 21 years old when he arrived as a refugee in Switzerland. The young refugee landed in Geneva with little to his name. However, the young and passionate man did not let that stop him. Although Geneva was full of watchmaking manufacturers at the time, Antony did not immediately find his passion for the industry. Instead, he tried his hand at many other jobs, such as importing and trading wines and even painting. However, when these entrepreneurial endeavors did not lead to success, Patek finally got into the watch business. At first, he was only trading and selling watches that were created by other well-known designers and manufacturers, but he quickly developed a fascination with the watches themselves and decided to start his own manufacturing business. On March 1, 1839, Patek finally made his dream a reality and created his own watchmaking business. In order to do so, he partnered with a fellow immigrant, Franciszek Sepek, and the two began making pocket watches. Over the next 5 years, Antony and Franciszek worked hand in hand, perfecting their craft and creating beautiful and functional pocket watches. They uniquely used their Polish and Czech heritage to create artistic pieces that portrayed heroes from their homelands. However, their creative differences proved to be debilitating, and they closed and liquidated the company in 1845. Only 6 years after they had started. 1 year before the company dissolved, in 1844, at the French Exposition, Antony had met a fellow watchmaker by the name of Jean-Adrien Philippe. Philippe was the son of a watchmaker, and therefore knew the trade inside and out. In fact, the young Frenchman had worked for various watch companies throughout Paris, London, and Versailles, and even created the first pocket watch that could be wound without a separate key. When he displayed his invention at the French Industrial Exposition in 1844, his life changed as he not only received an award for the creation, but also met his soon-to-be partner, Antony Patek. It was clear from their very first meeting that the two had very similar ambitions and styles when it came to making watches, and just 1 year later, the two officially became partners. For the first few years, the company was known only as Patek & Cie, and Philippe worked as the technical director, although it was quite clear to all that his influence was immense. And in 1851, the company name was officially changed to Patek Philippe & Cie. Their business relationship was very clear-cut. Patek was responsible for the marketing, and Philippe headed the manufacturing aspects. With Patek's attention to design and delicate adornments, and Philippe's deep technical knowledge, their success was almost immediate. Europe's elite was enamored with the beautiful and perfectly functioning watches they created. Even the great Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom purchased one of their pieces from the London Exposition in 1851 and quickly bought a second watch that fastened like a brooch. Over the next 20 years, the watchmaking company Patek Philippe & Cie became one of the world's most illustrious and sought-after companies, just as the two watchmakers had dreamed. However, Antony Patek, the once young Polish immigrant with a dream, sadly passed away from health complications at only 65 years old in 1877. Although he was able to see his incredible aspirations realized, It turned out that Antony was only the creator of what would be a watchmaking empire that would eventually span 3 centuries. Antony's son Leon was only 20 years old at the time, and although it was offered to him, he decided not to follow in his father's footsteps and run the company. Instead, he chose to receive a stipend of 10,000 francs, in today's currency $1,200, per year, and relinquish his rights to the business. Luckily, the company continued to thrive, even without a Patek on board, and they kept the name the same to both honor Antony's legacy and because they were already so well known around the world. As the 20th century approached, Philippe and the other joint owners of the company decided to diversify their partnerships. While they had several, one of the most important relationships they founded was with a Brazilian company, Gondolo and Laboreau. This partnership was so essential to Patek & Philippe's success because their business in South America could continue to thrive as Europe faced economic and socio-political struggles as well as World War I in the coming years. In fact, Gondolo and Laboreau handled at least 1/3 of the production of the Swiss watches, and around Brazil, people began calling watches Pateks. During this time, Jean-Adrien Philippe was still running the company with the help of other board members and shareholders and was watching his and Antony's business become a global empire. However, he decided to pass the reins to his son, Joseph-Émile Philippe, in 1891, and sadly, he passed away just 3 years later in 1894. Luckily for the business, and unlike Patek's son, Philippe's youngest was more than excited to take over the family business, although Joseph's own son Adrien would be the last of either the Patek or Philippe family to run the business. In 1932, everything changed for the company Patek Philippe & Say. The Great Depression had settled like a cloud over Europe and around the world, and the company experienced an extreme financial crisis. In order to save the seemingly failing business, the board decided to contract Charles and Jean Stern, who owned the successful company Cadran Stern Frères. Patek and Philippe were already using the Stern brothers to supply the dials for their watches and therefore already had a cohesive working relationship before the merger. Within only a year, the Stern brothers had purchased Patek and Philippe and were the company's sole owners. The Stern family took the company very seriously and dedicated themselves to creating new and innovative watches that were technically sound. Charles's son Henry Stern came into the picture in 1934 and created the Henry Stern Watch Agency based in New York City. With a strong foothold in the United States, the company began to regain its former glory. But the real change occurred when Henry's son, Philippe, made his way into the industry. Philippe was born in 1938 and spent much of his early years in New York with his father. He loved the watchmaking industry just as Patek and Philippe once did, and although he took several years on his own, he eventually joined the family business in 1966, bringing with him incredible new ideas and knowledge that would change the company forever. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. In the 1970s, there was a drastic change in the world of watchmaking as the new quartz watches were now available at a far lower price point than the Swiss mechanical watches that Patek Philippe was making. Luckily for Patek Philippe, Philippe Stern was ready and willing to change the course of history and began devoting his time and money to making perfectly functioning watches that could be sold at an affordable price point. The company not only stayed viable but thrived through the 1980s and 1990s. And when Philippe's son entered the business in 1993, they were still considered one of the best watch manufacturers on earth. Thierry Stern officially took over as president from his father in 2009, and although he had big shoes to fill, he is considered wildly successful in the industry. By 2010, the company was producing 40,000 pieces every year, and only 2 years later, that number jumped to 62,000. In 2018, 7 Patek Philippe watches were listed among the 10 most expensive watches sold at auction. In 2023, Patek Philippe is still known for its impeccable watches, which are among some of the most respected and beloved timepieces available today. While the company stayed true to its creator Antony Patek's vision and dedication, they have also been able to adjust to the modern era and create innovative and beautiful watches worn worldwide. Today, you can not only find Patek Philippe watches on the wrists of the world's elite, but there is also an entire museum, the Patek Philippe Museum in Geneva, that hosts these iconic and historical pieces. Patek Philippe is considered one of the oldest watchmaking companies in the world, as they have continued to design and build watches without fail over the course of 200 years. Through war, depression, and ever-changing times, Patek Philippe has been one of the only watchmaking companies to continue to produce perfect timepieces. One of the most interesting aspects of Patek Philippe's success is that they never implored gimmick marketing ploys or celebrity endorsements. They simply let the watches speak for themselves. And there is no doubt that they are still thriving with a current net worth of over $3 billion and customers around the world that are completely enthralled with Patek Philippe watches. To think that this watchmaking empire was started by a Polish immigrant who fled from his country to start a new life in Switzerland is almost unbelievable. But the story of Anthony Patek and his partner Jean-Adrien Philippe is entirely true. And with their famous slogan, "You never actually own a Patek Philippe, you merely look after it for the next generation," it's safe to say that Patek Philippe will be around for a very long time. Hungry for another fascinating business story? Click on the following video to hear the crazy story about the crocodile tennis player who invented Lacoste.